as we were talking about earlier, with the chance for political upheaval, which are the precursors we saw with the election of Barack Obama, and with how well Ron Paul did, which just surprised many political analysts, that the public is ripe for, I think, a dark horse from an independent party. And I really think that there's probably the best chance in America's history to see an independent come in and not just scare the establishment by robbing votes here and there and thereby getting some influence, but maybe even winning the election. If the public is sufficiently upset with the economy and with the two major parties, and they certainly have a good right to be, then I think they may, in fact, go off in a third direction. And that has the potential to be very beneficial for America.
Possibly, but you have this fascist premise that everybody is taught in the government-controlled schools, which is that the government should do whatever appears necessary, no exceptions, no limits. So, and that's how basically America has gotten into the mess that it's in today, is people were taught in their government-controlled schools that the government should do whatever appears necessary, and so it has been. It has been just trampling all over the Bill of Rights and other parts of the Constitution, finding loopholes here and there. And so the population has this built-in mentality where the more scared they get, the more they want a strong government to save them.
Yes.
And down that road lies Nazi Germany and Stalin's Russia and so forth. So we really have to begin to convince people that the problem, the root cause of the problem, is political power itself. It corrupts. History teaches no clearer lesson that political power corrupts the morals and the judgment, and the power itself is what the problem is. The government has way, way too much of it, and it's been playing God, and whenever people play God, they do it badly, so the government has wrecked the economy, and things are likely to get worse because of the power.
But I think more and more people are beginning to realize that, and if they didn't, they would not have gone for Ron Paul's message.
I agree.
And I think that what we're going to see with an independent party is basically what we see with every other movement in America, whether it's social or political or even in the entertainment area. You're going to have a few sharp people get together and lead the movement. And they are going to attract a lot of other people who had not quite gotten that far in their thinking, but who realize the importance of it and the truth of it. And at that point, I think we're going to see the big changes that I've been talking about. Just take a look at Ron Paul, for example. He started out with his libertarian base, but probably the people who voted for him, not 1 in 10 was a libertarian.
That's a good point.
They were just sharp young people who realized that the way things have been going so far were very badly, that it didn't matter whether it was Republican or a Democratic president or Congress, that either side was messing things up terribly, and that the only solution is to start with something very different. And that message sold. Young people especially realized the truth of it all and flocked to the Ron Paul movement. And I think we could see something similar happen after this next phase of the economic downturn. I think we're going to have many, many more times unhappy people than we have today.
Yeah.
And they are going to express themselves, whether the government wants them to do it or not.
Yeah. Let me say a few words about the Bill of Rights. A huge part of the population knows little or nothing about it, partly because they were steered away from it in the schools. The schools teach that these sorts of things are really only accessible to experts who understand these things, and we have to trust the opinions of the experts. And so there's very few Americans who actually sit down with the original document and read the thing. Because they're convinced that they won't understand it, that they need the Supreme Court or somebody else to tell them what it means.
God help us.
What you find if you start reading the Constitution, and especially the part of it called the Bill of Rights, is that it's written for ordinary people who do not have any special knowledge of law or politics or history. And the reason it's written that way is so that the people themselves would have an owner's manual for the government that they would be able to read and match against the government's behavior and say to themselves, is the government really following this thing or not?
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, call it the owner's manual. I never thought about that, but that's exactly what it is, yes.
Right. So my, first thing I encourage everybody to do is get a copy of the Constitution. You find it on the internet, if they haven't erased it already.
Yes.
And read it, and do not read it from the standpoint of what would a lawyer think this says, or what would the Supreme Court decide on this, or what would historians say. Just read it as an ordinary individual working American who is going to sit down with the owner's manual and figure out how this thing's supposed to run.
Yes.
Because that's the way the American founders wrote it. Alexis de Tocqueville, when he was traveling around America in the early 1800s, he commented that practically every American had a copy of the Constitution in his back pocket, and when some sort of political discussion arose, they would all reach in their back pockets and pull out their Constitution and say, now let's see what it says here. The government's supposed to be
we need a lot more of that.
Yeah. So the Constitution, the whole thing is extremely important, but we home in on, Jim and I home in on the Bill of Rights as being the finest, clearest, shortest description of what your liberties are supposed to be. And to me, the most important part of the Bill of Rights is the part that is most ignored, which is the 9th and 10th Amendments, which say that the government is only allowed to have the power that is clearly described in the Constitution.
And that's the one that has been most violated.
Right. So the whole country has gone in the other direction, assuming the government should do anything that isn't prohibited by the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But in fact, the 9th and 10th Amendments say that the government is only allowed to do what the Constitution explicitly authorizes it to do. And as one example, does the Constitution really authorize the federal government to take your tax money and use it to protect the rulers of Saudi Arabia against their own people?
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about giving money to Saudi Arabia or to put aircraft carriers around Saudi Arabia to protect the government against the people. It's crazy.
Yes.
But the assumption is that the government somehow has that power. And so, again, the 9th and 10th Amendments, to me, are the very most important part.
Well, one of the things that we have to get around is years and years of public school teaching that has people believing that the Constitution is kind of a relic, and it points us kind of in the right direction, but we couldn't really follow it today, that life is too complicated, the economy is too complicated, and that if we tried to follow any sort of a constitutional government, that it would just not function at all. And my position is that there are a lot of the government that shouldn't function at all, and we'd be better off if it didn't. But you have, the population that believes, I think, largely that the Constitution really could not be applied today. And I think just the opposite is the case, that not only could it be applied, but it should be, and it would likely result in a far better America.
That's a good point. Not only is the Constitution workable today, we need it today more now than ever before.